Good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome back to Hilaal Live. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us, and my colleague Luqman Shadrack for taking you through that first part of the show. Now, the World Halaal Food Festival will be taking place this weekend, and one of those that will be contesting in it, it's Gorima'S Culinary Fusion. Joining us now from Gorima'S is Arshad Mullah. Arshad, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah so much for joining us.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me, Faraz.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. So, Arshad, let's talk about obviously the event that you guys are going to be contesting in. Obviously, it's not a contest, but it's more of like a stall just to obviously showcase Gorima. So, talk to us about that event that will be happening this weekend in the United Kingdom.
Okay, so the World Halaal Food Festival is taking place at the London Stadium in the east of London. It's at the stadium that hosted the Olympic Games and is now the home of West Ham United Football Club. It's become a trend in the UK now to have halal food festivals. I just got off the phone with my colleague who's doing our distribution in the UK, and there was a similar type of event in Manchester a few weeks ago. So, like we get the halal goods markets here in South Africa, the halal eating festivals or the halal goods festivals seem to be mushrooming in the UK as well. With the growing Muslim population, you get a demand for a different type of flavor or different types of flavors from around the world. So if you go have a look at the World Halaal Food Festival website, you'll see that they've got a number of exhibitors bringing cuisine from around the world, from Mexican to Filipino to Chinese to traditional Western foods that are now halal. So it looks pretty exciting, and we are excited because it's Gorima'S first foray into the Western world, if you can call it that, because we are now going to be officially distributing our products out into the UK. And this is a bit of, for myself personally, it's going back to our roots, where I've got to be there on the ground, giving tasters and demos of our products to the people of the UK.
Arshad, now you arrive at the United Kingdom, and obviously you're going to be displaying your range of goods. Now, it's not only spices that Gorima'S keeps, but it's a whole range of other food products. So, what are you looking forward to the most in terms of displaying not only a South African flavor, but also a South African Indian flavor in terms of the spices that are going to be available for the public to come and watch?
Yeah, so, if you walk into a typical Gorima'S store, you're going to be faced with maybe 2,600 different products. We've selected out of that maybe about 10 products that are going to be sold at the market. It's 10 of our best sellers, and it's the products we feel that are reflective of the Gorima'S flavor and of the Gorima'S ethos. When my Auntie Karija started Gorima'S all those years ago, she started by making products that would be easily accessible and easy to use for the working mom, for the single parent, or for somebody who doesn't have the time to make their own masala at home. So that's what we're excited about. We're excited about bringing this flavor and this convenience to our customers.
Arshad, you mentioned something important, the convenience. Maybe 20 years ago, you wouldn't have found that convenience, and things have really changed in the last, 15 years. How important is convenience, especially in an environment that we are in where, everything is in such a rush, and all you want to do is you want to go home and quickly prepare a meal. Talk to us about that, right. The importance of convenience.
So, my late aunt Karija Mal was a real visionary because she saw this need in 1979, more than 20 years, almost 40 years ago, or more than 40 years, you can call it. And, what we had in our mind in those days was, I don't know if you remember, if you had a grandmother or even your mom. They'd buy their grains and their spices, and you'd see them putting it on a tray and sifting out all the seeds and the stones, and then selecting only the best ones to crush it, put it in a mill, then maybe put it in the dabba, and then later on when they're cooking, do that. Now, what my aunt saw was people didn't have the time to do that kind of stuff before. So she made it much easier where everything was ground, everything was blended to a certain recipe. So when you cooked, all you had to do was just drop in a tablespoon or two of the spice in there. So convenience, I think nowadays we want good tasting food. We don't want to be buying out too much. We want to be cooking at home, but we don't have the time. If you want to cook everything from scratch, my wife always teases me. If I cook in the kitchen, I need like 4 hours in the kitchen, while she needs half an hour. So we want to make it easy and accessible to everybody. And that's what convenience is all about for us.
Arshad, you talk about, wanting to cook at home. I remember during the COVID pandemic, of course, we only had one choice, and that was to cook at home. But obviously, everything has opened up, and people have returned to the restaurants. And I guess, you want to spoil yourself here and there. But, how does, an organization like Gorima'S, still convince the people that the best food will always be the home food?
Look, I think you've got to package it in the right way. You've got to appeal to their senses. A lot of times, I met a gentleman last week, and he says, the barakat just still comes out
Yes.
when you cook at home. And you can, there's an ingredient that nobody can sell when you're cooking, and that's love. And that is your well, I don't mean it physically, your sweat falling in there, but there, it's the metaphorical, the metaphor of the sweat going into the food and the love going into the food. And that's what's important. And, I believe there's always a space for people to want to cook and explore and experiment. Because if I ask person A to make a curry, and I ask person B to make the curry, and to compare the type of curry that they grew up eating, chances are they're not going to be exactly the same. They may be similar, but people experiment and they do things differently. So we will still sell, besides selling the ready-made mixes, in our stores, we still sell your base spices, where some people prefer a bit more black pepper, or some people prefer a bit more jeera. So it's up to them to decide what they want in their dish.
Arshad, you're actually making me hungry right now with all the stock of spices. But, I remember when my grandmother she used to cook when I used to come back from school, and she used to use the traditional red chili spice. Things have changed, hasn't it? And I know Gorima'S keeps such a wide variety of spices. So talk to us about the evolution of spices and just the range that is available now. Not just not just in Durban, but for example, across the whole of South Africa, that when you enter a store like Gorima'S Culinary Fusion, you've got such a wide range to choose from.
Yeah, look, it's amazing that. I'll tell you something interesting. In my first trip to India, this was in 2010, we had our agent. It's in an Indian home in Mumbai. It's a sense of pride when you go and visit them. They take you around their house and show you the different rooms and take you to the kitchen and stuff. And so I walked into the kitchen of our agent, and I looked around and I saw a gas burner, not a typical stove like we have, but a 2-plate gas burner that's hooked up to a gas bottle. And I asked, so you guys don't have a normal stove here? Where's your oven? And the gentleman pointed to the microwave, and I said, no, don't you guys bake? And that's when I realized, you know what? In India, typical Indians do not bake at home. And here we are in South Africa, and we've grown up with a lot of European influenced baking. And so, what's amazing is that we've taken on other cultures' cuisine, and they have taken ours. I've had many a white customer from Natal come to me and say, you know what, I travel the world, but I don't like any other curry but a Durban Indian curry. And we have evolved And I think the evolution was brought about as through necessity. In South Africa, when our ancestors came through, they didn't have access to all the spices and herbs that a typical Indian person had in their home country. So they had to make do with what was available locally. So, for example, your typical South African biryani. The first time I had a biryani abroad, I was like, "What's wrong with this? There's no masoor in here." And it's only years later that I found out that outside of South Africa, you're not going to get masoor in your biryani. It's a very South African thing. So what's amazing is that we are always evolving, and we are adapting, and we are bringing in new things into onto our palates, and we're learning. I have an Irish aunt who once told me when I was much younger. She says, "You know what? You need to educate your palate, son." And that's what we got to do. We got to be open. I sometimes call some of my friends who say I don't eat this and I don't eat that. I call them gastronomic bigots to say, you know what? Come on, guys, you got to try something. You don't know what you will like. You can't decide you don't like something without having tasted it. So we got to be adventurous.
Arshad, one final question before I let you go. You talk about different types of biryanis. There is a clear differentiation between the South African Indian way of cooking it. For example, if you eat it, of course, at a Pakistani restaurant, clear differences there, but I think each one of them very, very unique in its own kind. Arshad, one final question I have to slot in. This, of course, being the World Halaal Food Festival, how much has halal grown, not just here in South Africa, but across the world? And of course, the conscience that many other non-Muslims across the world are now starting to find out about halal and the importance of halal and the impact it's making.
Look, it's hugely important to us. It's hugely important that we understand why we eat halal, and it's so that we may explain it to others what necessity is of eating halal food. I think when we eat halal, I just or when we are very fussy about choosing halal, and when we say halal, we don't only mean meat products. We need to look at whatever's out there and look at how it was actually brought to your plate, because I think there's a certain amount of we have to consider how it got to you to say, yes, is this proper halal meal that I have in front of me? I think globally there's an obsession with meat and meat products. Yes. It's a sign of prosperity that you must have meat. But we also have to be conscious about, for a long time we've talked about gelatin being in our foods and the source of the product, source of bovine gelatin versus porcine gelatin. Those kind of things are very important to consider when you're choosing. And something we need to be very particular about is reading the labels. And I think we as Muslims are quite aware as to what goes into our products, because we're always checking the labels to make sure that, yes, it doesn't have a halal stamp, but if I read the ingredients, I can tell, yes, if this is halal or not halal. And it actually makes you aware of what's going in there. Because my advice to a lot of people is, check that label and also look for things like fillers and get to understand what else is going in there, because it's not always pure stuff. It's there's flavorants, there's colorants, there's stuff to bulk it up. So we got to be aware of what's in there, and is it actually adding to the value of the product, or is it actually there to improve the profitability of the producer?
Arshad, that's all the time we have here. Jazakallah so much for making the time for us, and all the best ahead of that festival.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. All the best ahead of the World Halaal Food Festival happening in the London Stadium. Jazakallah again for joining us. Assalamu alaikum
so
wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's Arshad Mullah from Gorima'S Culinary Fusion. They'll be part of the stalls there at the London Stadium, the home of West Ham United Football Club. After the break, we'll be going to the Isha Salah in Makkatul Mukarram, and after that, I'll see you for your latest in news. Do stay tuned.